fresh meat.
Everyone's waiting for you. Do you believe in ghosts?
Hey everybody, it's Chris Bumbray from the Toronto International Film Festival with an early review of Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho. So in this one, a young woman, played by Thomasin McKenzie, who's obsessed with the British invasion era 60s, travels to London to attend fashion design school. She rents a room in Soho that once belonged to an aspiring singer played by Anya Taylor-Joy and finds herself living a glamorous 60s life through the eyes of the former tenant. However, she soon discovers that the 60s weren't all that glamorous, and soon the past and present begin to collide in dangerous, dangerous ways. So, Last Night in Soho is director Edgar Wright operating at the height of his talents. A glamorous ode to the 60s that's wise enough to acknowledge that underneath all the fashion, movies, and music, they may not have been that great after all. The movie allows Wright to branch out a little bit into much darker territory. While he's toyed with the horror genre with Shaun of the Dead, he's never gone as heavy into the genre as he does here. And Shaun of the Dead, as much as I love it and it's one of my favorite movies, I always have thought of it as a comedy and not necessarily a horror movie. Part giallo-inspired horror, but also part psychological thriller, and all cool. Last Night in Soho is widely entertaining from the first frame all the way to the last. It's also his first movie to have female protagonists, and he's got himself two terrific young actresses to play as leads. There's the down-to-earth and intensely likable Thomasin McKenzie, and then the glamorous and potentially more aloof Anya Taylor-Joy, or at least here. And they're a study in contrast. The two play well off each other, even if by design they're rarely on screen together. Rather, it feels like each is starring in their own mini-movie to some extent. Mackenzie's Eloise Turner is a terrific creation by Wright and co-writer Krysty Wilson-Cairns, who wrote The Great 1917. Having grown up enamored with 1960s London thanks to her grandmother's influence, and notably the grandmother is played by Rita Tushingham, who herself was a 60s film icon that starred in Richard Lester's classic The Knack and How to Get It, which is a big influence on this movie. Mackenzie's character is unusual, to put it lightly. She often sees her dead mother's reflection in the mirror looking back at her, which is, I suppose, is a touch unusual, and seems a little naive for the excesses of the London Fashion Institute she finds herself a student of. Yes, while they're all doing rails of cocaine in the bathroom, she's listening to, classic 60s music on her Beats headphones. For Mackenzie, this is only the latest in a slew of really great roles, including Leave No Trace, Jojo Rabbit, and Old. She's so compelling and likable that I really think that sooner or later she's going to rocket to the top of the Hollywood A-list. By contrast, Anya Taylor-Joy's 60s singer Sandy is far less naive. She uses her extreme beauty to get what she wants, namely musical stardom, but it's not as easy a trip as she thinks it's going to be, and she hitches her wagon to Matt Smith's Jack, a dashing ladies' man / man about town who's also a bit of a pimp. And he proves to be a lot more than she can handle. So Wright gets a lot darker here than he ever really has in his other movies, depicting Sandy's degradation in a pretty nightmarish way. It's a harsher film than he's ever done. He's always done R-rated movies, but they've always been what I would call a light R rather than a heavy R. Here, though, he really kind of gets deep into it, but true to Wright also, this movie is definitely fun and filled with some dazzling set pieces. Music has always been essential to his films, and similar to Baby Driver and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, it almost feels like he's flirting with making a full-fledged musical. There are several show-stopping musical moments, such as Taylor-Joy's performance of Petula Clark's Downtown, which has a really good voice, by the way, and the inclusion of Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tick's song that the movie borrows its name from. But there's dozens more, and I wish I had my phone on with me because I would have loved to have just kept shazamming some of the tracks as they came up, but I think that the audience at the TIFF premiere would have been too happy if I had done this. The music in the film, however, is dazzling, as is the really good score by Stephen Price. The supporting cast is an ace mix of British 60s icons like Rita Tushingham, the great Terence Stamp, and Diana Rigg in her last really amazing role, actually, as the landlady at Mackenzie's apartment. What a great role this is for her. And then there's also newcomers like Michael Ajao as a fellow fashion design student who's head over heels for Mackenzie. But honestly, look at her, who wouldn't be? Matt Smith is also really good in a very rare unsympathetic turn. He's a real bastard here. So if you're used to seeing him as Doctor Who or Prince Philip, you'll be surprised. Also, watch out for a few nifty nods to James Bond, with a huge Thunderball poster being featured prominently while everyone drinks the Vesper Martini that was famously created by Ian Fleming in the novel Casino Royale. Fun fact, I actually just got back from the Last Night in Soho party, and they were giving out Vesper Martinis. I had a few, more than a few, and
they were delightful.
So, in terms of gore, initially I would say that the blood level in this movie is pretty light, with Wright emphasizing psychological terror, at least at first. The look of the film is heavily inspired by Dario Argento, and like The Master, there's one or two massively gory set pieces that took the high-class TIFF crowd by surprise, with some audible gasps coming from the audience at Roy Thompson Hall. I wouldn't say that there are multiple buckets of blood in this movie, but there's at least one bucket of blood, and it's used pretty well. So, while I can't say I found Last Night in Soho terrifying, but to be completely honest, I'm very desensitized to horror movies, and it's very rare that something scares me. I still found it kind of psychologically unsettling, and I think that's what the movie was intended to be. It's a visceral thrill ride that really had me hooked from the first frame all the way until the last, and Wright really in a lot of ways is kind of a master of modern cinema. And this is a film that's filled with such a passionate love of movies, music, and the 60s that it's impossible to resist, and I give this one a really strong 9 on 10. It's pretty funny, but Edgar Wright, I think, has probably directed two of my favorite movies of the year, Last Night in Soho and his great Sparks Brothers documentary about the band Sparks.
Sort of almost like the point of the movie where be romantic about the past and sort of only remember the good stuff. And whenever you talk to them, there's always this ... before kind of they would talk about the other part, because they were there. And it's like, so kind of when there's, this is almost like sort of how I'd been before when you meet somebody there and you sound like a sort of like a, kind of a puppy dog saying, oh, what was it like in the 60s? And of course, like, there is more to it than just the good stuff.
Room is on the top floor.
It's perfect. I love it. If I could live any place and any time, I'd live here, in London, in the 60s. Last night, I saw something in my dreams. There was a girl.
And you are?
Sandy.
I got this kind of gift. I can see people, places, things others can't.
This is the closest most people ever get to their dreams.
They're not just dreams.
Jack, I don't want to do this.
You think you can just walk away?
They really happened.
What did you see?
Do you believe in ghosts? I want to report a murder.
You witnessed the murder last night, but you believe this was a vision from the past.
The guy that killed her is still out there. I have to stop him.
Where are you going?
I know what you did.
I've done a lot of things. You're gonna have to be more specific, love.
You can't save me.
So if you like this kind of content, make sure to click on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.